Welcome to Learning Thursdays. I'm Dean Hale with the OASAS Learning and Development Unit and your host for today's presentation. Today's presentation is titled An Overview of ACCES-VR Services. And my guest is Lori Boyd, LMHC, Certified Rehab Counselor, Masters in Education, and ACCES-VR's Coordinator of Workforce Development and Business Relations. She'll be joining me in just a moment. First, a word about Learning Thursdays. Learning Thursdays are offered to behavioral health professionals as a free learning opportunity with the goal of improving the knowledge and skills of the New York State substance use disorder workforce as we strive to improve the lives of individuals needing prevention, treatment, harm reduction, and recovery services. A goal of Learning Thursdays is to support the professional development of the treatment, prevention, harm reduction, and recovery workforce. We do this by offering regular presentations that are relevant to today's substance use disorder treatment professional. As always, if there are any questions, comments, or suggestions, please feel free to contact us at the Learning Thursdays mailbox. You can use the same mailbox to express an interest in providing a future Learning Thursdays program. And now, it's time to start the presentation and welcome Lori.
Thank you. ACCES-VR's mission is to assist individuals with disabilities with not only achieving, but also maintaining employment and advancing in employment, and support them with independent living through training, education, rehab services, as well as career development. ACCES-VR's vision is for all individuals with disabilities who want to work that they have the opportunity to achieve employment and independence. ACCES-VR has several offices. They're part of New York State's Department of Education. There are 15 district offices and 10 satellite offices throughout the entire state. ACCES-VR's purpose and process. ACCES-VR is focused on helping individuals with disabilities go to work. All the services that ACCES-VR provides are meant to help you as a person seeking employment meet your work goals and become employed. Having a disability does not automatically mean that you'll be able to receive ACCES-VR services. Individuals interested in working want to have the assistance of ACCES-VR must first apply for services and be determined eligible. Eligibility. How does ACCES-VR determine eligibility? When a person applies for services, an ACCES-VR counselor makes a determination if you are eligible. To be eligible, ACCES-VR services, for ACCES-VR services, a person must have a disability that is a significant impairment to becoming employed. What does that mean? It means that a person has to either have a physical, cognitive, or behavioral health related impairment that affects their ability to prepare for, enter in, engage in, retain, or advance in employment. ACCES-VR requires medical documentation that provides a diagnosis of a disability as well as having the impacts of that disability on their ability to work. ACCES-VR counselors also reviews to make sure that if there's a reasonable expectation that the ACCES-VR services will lead to employment, as well as if your disability does not prevent you from being able to participate in ACCES-VR services. Once all three of these criteria have been reviewed, ACCES-VR counselor makes a determination if you are in fact eligible for ACCES-VR services. Now, here are some examples of the types of disabilities that we work with. This list does not entitle all of these particular disabilities that we cover, but these are just some examples. If a person has respiratory and/or heart condition, carpal tunnel syndrome, arthritis, diabetes, allergies, mental health related issues, substance abuse and alcoholism or addiction, learning disabilities, intellectual disabilities or developmental disabilities, multiple sclerosis, orthopedic impairments, speech impediments or low vision, hearing loss or deafness. This list has various disabilities, as I mentioned. It is not all inclusive. These are some of the types that we cover, and we also cover a myriad of other ones. As we've shared earlier, ACCES-VR provides services to people with any type of disability except legal blindness. People who are legally blind can receive vocational services from New York State's Commission for the Blind. Also, it's important to remember that having a disability is not the only criteria for an individual to be eligible for ACCES-VR services. It is how we determine the disability and in determining whether it's impacting their ability to be employed. For example, if a person has diabetes, then if the diabetes is under good control and works indoors with a non-hazardous environment, they may not meet the criteria for our services. However, if they are not able to take regular breaks where they could test their blood sugar or have meals at appropriate times, then they might require our services. This person might not be likely to be eligible if they have all of those things in place at first. But as I said, if the person's diabetes is not under good control, or the individual works outdoors and in an occupation that provides them where they'd be prone to having accidents or injury, or does not have consistent meal times or breaks, they may be eligible for our services. An individual with substance abuse or addictions, they may also need a new recovery plan, or they may have worked in the past as a bartender, for instance. This individual is not eligible to return to their previous job because of the impairment of being a person with an addiction. They may be eligible for services to get retraining for new types of employment. Or if somebody who's been in recovery for 20 years and they've been working successfully as a counselor, they may not be eligible as well because their particular disability has been under control and maintained. Additionally, it's important to notice that ACCES-VR counselors will be able to understand all disabilities, and they may be able to see some of the impacts that the individual has, not just the disability that they present on at application. After they meet this person, they can determine that there are additional disabilities that will be also needing to be addressed as well. And they may have an impact on their ability to work. Okay, so individuals who receive SSI or SSD, if you receive Supplemental Security Income, SSI, or Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, you are presumed eligible for ACCES-VR services. If you have an SSI or an SSDI award letter, it is helpful that you can provide that to ACCES-VR, as it will allow the ACCES-VR counselor to make you eligible. If you do not have a copy of the letter, ACCES-VR will ask you to assign a release so that we may contact Social Security to confirm that you, in fact, are receiving SSI or SSDI. Now we get to the planning and the goal setting and developing an individualized plan for employment, or an IPE. An individualized plan for employment, or an IPE, states your work goal and the steps needed to achieve the goal, as well as what you need in order to get a job. Your IPE is your own personal pathway from where you are today to where you're going to be eventually when you're ready to get a job. Your work goal must interest you. It must be a job in which you can perform with training or accommodations. It must be mutually agreed upon by you and your ACCES-VR counselor, and it must be in a field with jobs within your local labor market. After you're found eligible, it will be time for you to work on planning to determine what your work goal looks like. Together with your ACCES-VR counselor, you will develop your individualized plan for employment. Your IPE is your own personal pathway. You get to decide what kind of goal you're working towards with the assistance of your voc rehab counselor. The first step in creating the IPE is identifying your work goal. Some things to think about beforehand: where you are today, what is your goal for the future, and what steps do you think you need to take in order to reach this goal. Your work goal must also detail the skills that you have, the training that you may need. Speaking of skills, when you come to ACCES-VR, we'll be determining whether your plan will include training, education, or direct job placement. And we take a look at your skills. Are your skills transferable, or do they need some updating? Or do you need complete retraining? The considerations that we also take a look at are some of your areas of interest and your aptitudes, also your strengths and your limitations. Other considerations are labor market statistics and the ACCES-VR policies. While working with your ACCES-VR counselor and your work goal, the services that you may need to get the job that you want, we're going to take a look at the transferable skills. And those are skills that can go from one job to another. For instance, it refers to your communication ability, also customer service, the skills that you've used on previous jobs that will be the same regardless where you go. Are you good in terms of communication? Are you good with teamwork and problem solving? Are you great with adaptability? Skills that oftentimes need updating. For instance, if you've been in a job for many years and then that job was phased out. For instance, think about the toll collectors. Prior to E-ZPass, we had toll collectors all around New York State. Being in that job for a long period of time made you an expert at doing that type of job that no longer exists. When your skills need to be updated, we will help you by finding out other jobs that you could be doing with just getting a little bit more training. Now, we also take a look at your considerations, interests versus aptitudes. Interests are things that we like to do. Aptitudes are things that we're good at. Your strengths and limitations may change over time. For instance, as we get older, sometimes, Dean and I were talking about vision. Our vision sometimes gets more in need of assistance, so we'll be utilizing the glasses or any other assistive devices in order for us to be able to do things. Our programs are determined by labor market standards and the policies that are governed by ACCES-VR, which come from both New York State and federal guidelines. Here are some examples of the types of rehabilitation services that are available. Job counseling, job assessment and development, job placement, vocational or technical training, college or BOCES or other classroom learning, books and stools, also driver training, occupational licenses, supported employment, vehicle modifications, self-employment, high school to work transition services, rehabilitational technology, and job coaching, as well as a host of many more. Being eligible for ACCES-VR services does not mean that you will be entitled to all of these services. Those are going to be coming to you based on your particular needs. Once you have established that you have a work goal, ACCES-VR counselor will then help you identify the types of services that you may need in order to meet your goals and to get a job. It is important to know that not everyone who is eligible for services will be eligible to receive all of these services. Once you and your ACCES-VR counselor have agreed upon a work goal and the services required for you to meet that goal, you'll be determined to get the types of services that we mentioned. These services, along with the work goal, will be listed on your IPE. Remember, ACCES-VR provides services needed to help you get a job. Keep this in mind when discussing the services with your counselor. Now let's take a few minutes to talk about some of the services which are of no cost to you and which may also be provided if you meet ACCES-VR's financial need. Here are some examples. For eligibility determination, ACCES-VR will be providing assessments, whether they are medical or psychological. ACCES-VR can also provide some vocational guidance and counseling, evaluations or interest inventories, rehabilitation technology evaluations, supportive employment, work tryouts, or on-the-job trainings. For eligibility, a person with a learning disability may have had some remedial assistance while they were in school, but that was a long time ago. They may need new documentation indicating that they were in a specific disability or they have a need for learning assistance. This assessment will help them determine what is needed and what kind of reasonable accommodations will help them get and maintain a job. A vocational evaluation could assist them in planning to develop what accommodations will be needed to be requested in the future. And rehab technology refers to a vendor performing a diagnostic evaluation to determine what types of technology supports are also needed. Ergonomic chairs, keyboards may be necessary. Now, regarding supportive employment or job coaching, those assessments will be determined whether the person needs support while on the job to be successful. Work tryouts, that's a program that benefits both the business or the employer and the person with a disability or their employee. It gives the person an employment opportunity to use their newly acquired skills in a job where they may not have had experience before. On-the-job training is also another program. It's ongoing follow-up services to ensure that a person is meeting the performance standards and satisfaction of the employer. It also could assist with career development and advancement planning. Okay, ACCES-VR services that are of no cost to you. Training in job-seeking skills, resume assistance, technology assistance, training for job searches, interviews prep, interview skills training, work readiness training, direct placement services, remote job placement, short-term job coaching, or supportive employment, as I just mentioned. ACCES-VR has many different types of job placement services available to help you meet your work goal. Some of these are of no cost to you. Training in job-seeking skills, as well as you may know, working during the pandemic taught us that we have to learn to be flexible and creative in how we approach our job search, utilizing resources such as Department of Labor, the one-stop centers, or ACCES-VR funded/approved vocational training programs or vendors may assist you. The interview skills training, in addition to practicing and preparing you for interviews, we recognize that since more remote interviews are being conducted, ACCES-VR staff can provide you with tips and best practices on how to present yourself in a virtual interview. And we give you suggestions on how to arrange your environment or contingency planning or when technology mishaps happen. In terms of work readiness, those are soft skills. They're important to successfully maintain employment, such as being dependable, punctual, accepting constructive criticism, getting along with your coworkers, dressing appropriately, etc. These are the types of trainings that people learn about how to be a good coworker and get along with others in a professional environment. Some of the short-term coaching provided to temporarily assist an employee become acclimated to the job and meet performance standards of that company. They may work one-on-one with a person teaching them those skills and promoting confidence in doing their work-related tasks. For instance, and supportive employment is available if you are eligible. It includes a special job placement assistance, reviewing job tasks, and then sometimes altering those job tasks or giving them to someone else to handle if it's outside of your skill set, or customizing employment. For instance, if a file clerk uses a wheelchair, a reasonable accommodation perhaps would be to have the file cabinets lowered so that they can independently file their documents. A job coach could assist the person in advocating for this kind of reasonable accommodation. In addition, ACCES-VR works closely with and is a partner of the American Career Centers across the state. You can use all of those services at your local career center, and ACCES-VR services can help you find and keep a job. Now, here are some ACCES-VR services that are based on your resources. Telecommunications, sensory and other technology, aids and devices, occupational and business licenses, transportation, driver's training when needed for a job, modifications of vehicles, homes, or the work site, Training services at an approved program or vocational training at a proprietary school, required training services or textbooks or materials, fees, equipments may also be included. Transportation costs to/from your training program is also a consideration. In addition to the services that ACCES-VR provides at no cost to you, there are also some services that ACCES-VR will only contribute to if you meet financial need definition. ACCES-VR's financial need definition is based on your income and resources. You may also be required to contribute to the cost of these services in addition to ACCES-VR. And please remember, all services that ACCES-VR provides are based on if they are needed for you to obtain a job based on your work goal. If your work goal requires vocational training or college, ACCES-VR has limits on how much it will contribute towards those services. ACCES-VR can only provide assistance towards training programs or colleges when they are approved by an ACCES-VR vendor. Not all vocational training programs and colleges are ACCES-VR vendors. For example, telecommunications, sensory, and other technology aids and devices, vibrating alarm clocks, hearing aids, these devices are often utilized by individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing. Occupational and business licenses are needed for some vocations, such as to become a barber or a cosmetologist. Another is an example of OSHA. Transportation or car fare using public transportation to get to and from training programs. Driver training, training to become a welder, but employers oftentimes require the employee to have a driver's license. So driver's training might be provided in order to help that person become gainfully employed. There's some modifications to vehicles, homes, or the work site. They may assist an individual with mobility issues to utilize the vehicle to get to and from work, to exit their home, or to attend a training program to perform essential functions of their job. Training services can only be provided to programs that are being approved by ACCES-VR. In addition to tuition, fees, and additional required services that may be authorized, examples are textbooks, materials, fees, and equipment. Other things such as pens, pencils, notebooks, unless they are for a class like art, may not be provided for by ACCES-VR. Examples of types of equipment: if you're in training for culinary arts and you require a knife set as a part of your training, ACCES-VR may make a purchase of that. As we discussed regarding transportation, room and board may be a service that would be considered if you live on campus instead of traveling to and from school. Another ACCES-VR service is worker retention services. Do you have a disability that will be affecting your job? Are you at risk of losing your job? Did you have your job that then acquired a disability that is now negatively impacting your job? Did you know that ACCES-VR may also assist individuals who are currently employed? If you are in jeopardy of losing your job, we will take a look at that and also provide you with different services. If you have a disability and you're currently working and there's a problem, ACCES-VR may be able to help you with worker retention services. Your disability may not have been impacting you until recently. Or you may have acquired a disability after you got the job. If you have a disability and you're struggling on your job, please contact us and we may be able to help you. We'll provide a job analysis, and that means we'll look at the tasks that you are required to complete and see what reasonable accommodations may help you in maintaining your job. We'll work with you on how to talk to your employer about requesting a reasonable accommodation. We can also provide vocational counseling to identify if you want to consider having a new job or a new career. We'll provide wage reimbursement if your employer wants to retrain you. ACCES-VR is here to help. The worker retention services will be important to help you understand what you can do in order to keep your job. Here are some frequently asked questions. Question 1, am I responsible for the cost of ACCES-VR services? The answer is, depending on the type of ACCES-VR services and your circumstances, you may have to contribute to the cost of your service. Some ACCES-VR services are no cost, while others do require you to pay towards the cost. We always advise you to talk and have a discussion with your ACCES-VR counselor so they can help you create the best possible solution to the goals that you have. ACCES-VR team will complete a financial need review with you. You will need to share documentation about your household income, your assets, and financial dependency. The financial need review has to be updated every year. Another question, what are my rights? You're entitled to the following: confidentiality. All the information is confidential, and it's proposed that the Voc Rehab services are only needed to help you with that. You have the right to a review process. If you have an unresolved conflict or concern, there is some process for you to review to resolve that issue. ACCES-VR, also, you will get an access to a Client Assistance Program, or CAP. CAP is a free statewide network of advocates that assist you in order to get your disability-related issue reviewed and discussed if you have a discrepancy or a disagreement with the plan that has been in place for you. For more information about CAP, you can please reach out to the email address that is being shown on the screen. People oftentimes want to know about their rights. CAP is going to be able to listen to your particular needs and your concerns and give back feedback on all of that. Okay, now this slide here discusses and illustrates what the steps are in our process looks like. Initially, we have orientation, where an individual can either come to one of the district offices in the town that you live in, or the geographic area in which it's closest to you, or they can do it online. They'll get orientation where they'll learn more about ACCES-VR and the process. Then they're given an application. The application needs to be completed, and then determining of eligibility. That is when you're going to be assigned to a Voc Rehab counselor who will help you decide whether or not the service is going to be the proper service for you. Then once you've been determined eligible, the planning and the goal setting and developing the IPE will occur. After that puts in place all of the ideas as well as what the next steps are and the expectations are, the training and/or job placement will occur. After that, then we're going to be seeking employment. You may get assistance through a placement agency and/or our workforce development staff to help you get closer to getting a job, and that leads to success. This slide is basically a recap of the entire ACCES-VR process, where we've shared to you during this entire presentation. ACCES-VR has developed a series of orientation recordings to provide you with additional information about ACCES-VR services, how to apply for them, also letting you know what types of services we offer, and what to expect when you want to get a job that requires college. Please make sure you watch all the orientation recordings that are located on the ACCES-VR website. Please remember, ACCES-VR is here to help you, and you can achieve your work goal to be successful at a job. Here are some of the next steps. If you're interested in learning more or applying for our services, please review the ACCES-VR orientation recordings at our website. The overview to ACCES-VR services, your journey to employment, begins today. Also, we have another one called How to Apply for Services. And then the other one that we have is, do you want a job that requires a college degree? Please go to the website listed here for an application, authorization to release information and obtain it, as well as a list of medical documentation. If you're interested Those web pages will be very assisting to you to find out more information about our services and our agency. If you're interested in learning about how to apply for services, you get to submit an application to the website here, or you can mail it to your local ACCES-VR district office, and it'll include your application, a confidential health assessment, a medical documentation related to your disability, and an authorization to release or obtain information, also known as a consent form.
I want to thank Lori for today's program. I hope you will all find it useful while assisting clients in need of services. Your feedback is important to us. It helps us to know if we're meeting your educational goals and expectations. Once you've viewed the presentation in its entirety and completed the quiz, if prompted, please follow directions to access the SurveyMonkey website and take a moment to complete the evaluation. Once again, thank you for joining us. Keep up the good work. You're making a difference.